Okay, welcome to Uncensored Conservatism, episode 132. Today we're going to look at Project 2025 again. What's in it? Chapter 4, part 2 of chapter 4. So in part 1 of this chapter, I laid out that it involves the Defense Department, and it's a pretty important area since it's in the preamble to the Constitution, that highlighted part there about the common defense. So, continuing on, Miller suggests that the military stop using the MHS Genesis system that accesses private medical records for potential recruits. Instead, why not just go back to those medical exams by Army doctors? I mean, you may get fewer of these. It also says that all schools should require the completion of the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery if they receive federal funding, so that if a high school graduate chooses a military career, the military has a head start. And that military recruiters be allowed at high schools on career day or whatever. And that recruiters be allowed at congressional town halls in their home districts or at special events. Expansion of the ROTC program should be explored. When you think about it, this is one of the government's most effective programs. You get an education and the military gets a body. Now, here comes the controversial part. No transgenders in the military. Come on, these are just ugly dudes who make even uglier chicks, by the way. And when it comes to physical fitness and endurance, it would depend on the job with some minimal level of readiness, regardless, without respect to one's sex, your gender, your sex assigned at birth, or whatever they're calling it these days. It should be the job of anyone with a rank of 3 or 4 stars to make sure troops are combat ready. That means no politics and no social engineering in the military. And any service member who was kicked out of the military over their refusal to get the COVID vaccine should be reinstated to active duty at their previous rank and with back pay. Then again, of the 8,000 people who were kicked out, only 43 have expressed any interest in returning after the mandate, which should not have been a mandate in the first place, was lifted. Okay, here comes some more controversy for you if you think this is controversy. All diversity, equity, and inclusion programs and offices are to be terminated. Jesus. Okay, here we go. No more of this shit at the military academies. Communism will win. And I think he wore a Che Guevara t-shirt underneath that. Pay should be increased for military members. Military housing should be improved. And that an entire military family should be considered when moving personnel around. Oh, and expanding military daycare and employment for the opportunities for the spouses of military members. The number of 3- and 4-star generals as such is at an all-time high. We have now more than we did during World War II, whereas we have fewer with actual combat experience. We have more Navy admirals right now than this. Navy ships. There are 6 areas with the Army that should be prioritized. Long-range precision fires, the next generation combat vehicle, future vertical lift, the Army network, air and missile defense, and soldier lethality. Also, he says the Army should be increased by 50,000 soldiers. We have to stockpile munitions to meet our needs. Miller suggests we stop, back-to-back federal and state National Guard deployments. In other words, if you're deployed abroad by the Army, when you come back to, say, North Carolina, you don't get thrown right back into the North Carolina National Guard and go out and rescue hurricane victims. There has to be some downtime. Miller notes that Army suicide rates are escalating and something has to be done to address this tragedy. For the Navy, he suggests a fleet of 355 ships and definitely more drones for all branches of the military, but just don't fly them over New Jersey. The Air Force should be increased as if they were fighting 2 wars at a time and be on that level of readiness at all times. And the Air Force's pass-through funding scheme, which amounts to $40 billion a year and leaving the Air Force underfunded for decades. To make up, he suggests increasing the budget of the Air Force by 5% annually until the shortfalls are eventually made up. We should build, these are cool-looking jets, by the way, 60 to 80 F-35As per year for 4 years. Increase the number of B-21s, and they're really neat to look at if you've ever seen them. The chapter argues that the Sentinel ICBM should replace the outdated Minuteman missiles, especially since China is upgrading their ICBM capabilities. Double the number of EC-37B electronic warfare planes from 10 to 20 to meet the growing Chinese threat. Calls for the elimination of the Marine Corps law enforcement battalions. Continue the divestment of the M1 Abrams tank from the Marines. Reduce the number of advanced amphibious assault vehicles and their replacements. Increase the number of rocket artillery batteries. Increase the number of light armored vehicles. And maintain a fleet of 28 to 31 amphibious warships for the Marines. Now, most of these suggestions would convert the Marines into a more nimble fighting force, and incidentally, there is more in Project 2025 about the Navy that I didn't cover. The Space Force would become less defensive and more offensive and robust, according to Project 2025. It wants the Cyber Command separated from the NSA, but that would take congressional action. Further, the Cyber Command should cease its election interference operations and instead leave that to other law enforcement agencies. Chinese influence, military, economic, diplomatic, it has to be thwarted wherever possible, but especially in our own hemisphere. We need to improve our nuclear arsenal to meet a threat for the first time in our history, a nuclear threat from 2 countries, adversaries simultaneously, China and Russia. Besides the aforementioned Sentinel missile upgrade, we should pursue the long-range standoff weapon, the Columbia-class ballistic submarine, and the F-35 dual-capable aircraft. Make sure there's funding for the maintenance and upgrade of our nuclear warheads. Russia and China are developing hypersonic glide missiles. This is one area the United States is really lagging. We have to catch up and exceed their efforts. We have to rethink our missile defense system since both Russia and China are improving theirs. The Biden administration approved 20 next-generation interceptors. Project 2025 suggests that 64 is a more realistic number. And finally, develop a domestic homeland cruise missile defense system to thwart both China and Russia. Now, some people, the left, will say that these proposals are creating a new arms race, and they actually are. One can just hear the Senate floor speeches by this guy, and it will likely receive big pushback from all the usual sources. But holding up signs and adopting Ukrainian flag emojis on social media sites is not going to stop Russian aggression in Europe or anywhere else. Nor will it deter Chinese aggression, especially in the South China Sea and its vital shipping lanes, or this little midget in North Korea, or these batshit crazies in Iran. Whether this is the guide to get some of this done remains to be seen. But the doctrine of peace through strength worked in the first Trump administration, and there's no reason to believe it won't work now. And that's it for today. Have a great one and a more pleasant tomorrow.